for all the latest video updates, turn on the notification so let's listen to a mysterious story of a supernatural revenge. Was a freezing night in November. Faisal had just stepped out after watching the circus, and a shiver ran through his body from the cold. At that moment, a thought of his home and parents struck him. Very parents he had left without permission to see the circus. He knew that if he had asked them, they would never have allowed it. Not only that, but they would have kept a close watch on him. His room was separate from his parents' room. That night, he had been lying on his cot, waiting for them to fall asleep. When he finally heard his father snoring, he quickly but carefully got up and peeked into their room. Both were sleeping soundly on their cots. Satisfied, he slipped out of the house to go to the circus. Now, as thoughts of home and his parents returned to his mind, he began walking briskly toward the village, eager to reach home quickly before entering the village. There was an old, large graveyard. The only path to the village passed right through it. Lost in thought, Faisal had only walked a short distance along that path when he felt as though someone was walking beside him. The moment that feeling struck, an uneasiness crept over him. He stopped right there and looked behind him, then glanced all around, but there was no one in sight. Faisal was a Hafizikaran and a brave boy. That's why he neither panicked nor felt afraid. He stood there for a while, scanning the darkness, and then resumed his walk. His mind drifted back to his father, and he thought, if Abba finds out, I'm in trouble, because his father, Noor Hussein, was a very strict man. Faisal was already 16 years old, but even now, if he made a mistake, his father would beat him. This thought alone made his steps quickening. The graveyard there was an ancient, enormous banyan tree, its long branches hanging low, brushing the ground. Faisal had just reached the tree when he heard a chan-chan sound.
The sound began to grow clearer. It felt strange to him. It was as if a girl wearing anklets was walking around that tree, but how could there be a girl in the graveyard at this hour of the night? He thought. Just then the sound of anklets came again. Along with it, a soft feminine voice called him with great affection. The moment Faisal heard the voice, he froze. That voice enchanted him, and he found himself being drawn toward it, but he had only taken a few steps toward the tree when a powerful shiver ran through him. Suddenly he remembered many mysterious stories about that graveyard and banyan tree, stories he had never paid attention to and never felt fear from before. Yet now, despite the bitter cold, sweat began to break out on his forehead. Without realizing it, he began to recite verses from the Holy Quran. The moment his recitation started, a loud feminine scream echoed in the night. Hearing it, Faisal bolted toward his village. He kept reciting as he ran. Only when he reached near his house did he stopped to catch his breath. Running had left him panting. He stood there for a while, steadying his breathing and glancing back again and again. Then he climbed over the wall of his house and jumped inside quietly. He peeked into his parents' room. In the dim light of the lantern, they were sleeping on their cots, but something was making him uneasy. It stood there thinking for a while, but couldn't figure out what it was. There was a strange pricking sensation in his mind. After a while, he went to his own room and lay down on his cot, thinking about what had happened in the graveyard. His eyelids began to grow heavy with sleep. Heat was just drifting off when he heard the tinkling laughter of a girl. He quickly opened his eyes, thinking for a moment. He turned up the lantern's flame to light the whole room and looked around carefully, but there was no one except him. He lay back down again, reciting Ayatul Kursi, and then closed his eyes. Within minutes, he had slipped into the valley of sleep. He found himself standing on a mountain. Across from him, on another mountain, were his parents, dressed in pure white clothes. White clouds were settling over the mountaintop, which slowly they were moving toward his parents. Seeing himself so far away from them made him uneasy. Two mountains were connected to each other. Restlessly, he began running toward his parents, but a very large and deep gorge blocked his path. He barely managed to keep himself from falling into it. The distance across was far too great. Anxiously, he looked around but could not find any way to the other side. At last, he stood there sadly looking toward his parents, who were gazing back at him. In complete silence, with eyes full of love, he felt utterly helpless. Then his parents cast one last farewell glance at him before turning away and disappearing into the white clouds. He kept calling after them, but they did not return. He woke up with a start. His breathing was heavy like a bellows. "Oh, thank God it was just a dream," he thought as he found himself lying in his bed in his room. Yet that strange prickling unease in his mind still remained. He felt an intense thirst. He got up and poured water from the earthen pot in the room. He had barely drunk half a glass when a sudden realization struck him. The glass slipped from his hand, and he ran toward his parents' room. He remembered that his father always snored loudly in his sleep, but when he had peeked into their room on his way back from the circus last night, they had been sleeping in complete silence. That had created a small doubt in his mind which he couldn't figure out no matter how much he thought. And now, as it came back to him while drinking water, he rushed toward their room running. He flung the door open with such force that it rattled. The noise was loud, yet despite the commotion, his parents did not wake up. This stirred a deep unease in him, and a fear that something terrible had happened. Then, with heavy steps, he slowly moved forward and pulled the quilt off his father, but in the lantern's light, the sight beneath made a heart-wrenching scream burst from his mouth, and he collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest. Now the Imam Dean was walking quickly toward the mosque to give the morning azan as he passed by Noor Hussein's house. As he reached near the house, he heard a scream that made him stop in his tracks. He quickly knocked on the door, but after a long while there was no response from inside. This made him suspect that something was wrong. By that time, people from the surrounding houses had also woken up and gathered at Noor Hussein's door. They began asking Maulvi Sahib what had happened, but he himself knew nothing, so what could he tell the Maulvi? Sahib knocked on the door again, but this time too there was no result. So after discussing among themselves, they told one man to climb over the wall into the house. Maulvi Sahib sent another man to the mosque to give the azan. Man inside unlatched the door. Then Maulvi Sahib entered the house, followed by the others. The door of Noor Hussein's room was already open. Maulvi Sahib first called out to him in a loud voice, but when no one came out after some time, he went in himself. Right in front of him, Faisal was lying unconscious. He called out to him and then began shaking him. While shaking him, his eyes fell upon Noor Hussein lying on the cot ahead. The sight nearly made Maulvi Sahib scream. Noor Hussein's head was separated from his body. The words of the Kalma instantly came to his lips. For a while he kept reciting it aloud. At last he picked up the lantern and looked closer, and what he saw gave him a shock. The lantern nearly slipped from his hand. The head was lying apart from the body, but there was not a drop of blood on the bed. Looking at the neck, it seemed as if someone with very strong hands had twisted it off the body with sheer force. Then Maulvi Sahib looked at his wife and a shiver ran through him. Both bodies were in exactly the same state. When the other people saw the condition of the corpses, they began making excuses and slipping away. Maulvi Sahib now understood everything. Before this, he too had considered the strange stories about this house to be mere tales, but after seeing these unusual murders, he too was lost in thought. Everyone except him had now left, so Maulvi Sahib called for his wife and 2 daughters and then went to the mosque to lead the prayer. After the prayer, when Maulvi Sahib returned, Faisal had regained consciousness. He was deeply distressed and grief-stricken over the fate of his parents.
He was shocked to see his parents die so suddenly and so mercilessly, but seeing the cold-heartedness of the villagers made his heart want to weep tears of blood-mouth. Sahib too was astonished at this. At 10 o'clock the funeral took place. Before this, a few policemen had come, but after seeing the condition of the corpses, they left without taking any action at the funeral, there were only 4 people: Maulvi Sahib, his 2 sons, and Faisal himself. Noor Hussain and his wife had arrived in this village from India to Pakistan at the time of partition. They had only the clothes they were wearing and some cash. The villagers welcomed them warmly and gave them an abandoned Hindu house at the edge of the village. It had no boundary wall, only tree branches placed in front of the house like a curtain for them. This was more than enough. They had found a place to live without spending anything. Noor Hussain worked as a blacksmith. In one side of the house he built a small shed and set up a furnace to start his work there. Had never been a blacksmith in the village before, so his business quickly took off and he began earning wealth, and his son Faisal was born. As more money came in, they expanded the house. Right in front of it stood 2 trees about 1.5 to 2 yards apart. Sometimes at night it would seem as though the 2 trees were talking to each other, but Noor Hussain never paid much attention to it. Sent Faisal to Maulvi Sahib at the mosque to memorize the Quran. By then, the completed boundary wall had enclosed one of the trees inside the yard. That same night, a strong wind began to blow. When Noor Hussain stepped outside, he was struck by something strange. The branches of the 2 trees should have been swaying in one direction with the wind, but instead they seemed to be trying to move toward each other. Colliding and tangling together, they bent towards each other as if wanting to. At the same time, the sound of men and women wailing began to fill the air. Seeing all this made Noor Hussain's legs tremble. He quickly shut the door. "What happened? What is this noise outside?" his wife asked in a worried voice. "Nothing. Just keep quiet and go to sleep," he replied, his voice trembling. "But there must be something. I can hear people wailing," said. "Be quiet and go to sleep." He cut her words short. Speaking with anger, his wife looked at him in surprise, but without saying anything else, she lay down on the sofa. He spent the whole night awake hearing the noises. Little Faisal also woke up, and it took his mother a lot of effort to make him sleep again. This became a daily routine. Last, Noor Hussain grew fed up, but he had no solution to the problem. They were already troubled after extending the boundary wall, and now they could not even leave the house because they had nowhere else to go. They thought of calling a spiritual healer, but even after searching for some time, they could not find a good one, and the problem remained as it was. By now the whole village was saying that there was an evil presence in Noor Hussain's house, and people began keeping their distance. Every night they still heard the voices, but nothing more happened. There was no financial loss and no harm to life. They became used to the noises. When Faisal memorized his first para of the Quran, Noor Hussain recited verses in all 4 corners of the house at night, and suddenly the noises stopped completely. That night was the most peaceful night their house had seen in a very long time, and from then on, Faisal began reciting daily. After that, everything became normal. Time passed. They forgot about the whole incident, and when nothing happened to them, the villagers too forgot the talk of evil spirits and began mingling with them again. When Faisal completed his hifz, he started working alongside his father. It had been a long time since the incident of the spirits. By then, the roof of Noor Hussain's workshop had become very weak. He decided to replace the roof, and for that planned to cut down the tree. He even made a strong axe for the job. "Do not cut this tree. Do you not remember how much trouble there was when we built the boundary wall?" his wife reminded him, but Noor Hussain, he did not listen to her, and together with his son cut down the tree. When nothing happened until evening, he said to his wife, "See, nothing at all happened. You were just scared for no reason." But to his wife, this silence felt like the calm before a storm. She stayed quiet but was deeply troubled around that time. A fair was set up in a field near the village. near the village had gone to see it, except this family Noor. Hussein had no interest in such things, and never allowed his family to go either, but Fazl Hussein, after hearing his friends talk excitedly about the circus at the fair and the amazing stunts they had seen, began to feel an intense desire to watch it himself that night. In his excitement to see the circus, he forgot to recite the Holy Quran, and waited for his parents to fall asleep, as father had worked hard that day and was very tired. So he too forgot to have the recitation. Done, husband and wife went to sleep without it, and once they were asleep, Fazl slipped out to see the circus. That was when the jinn that had been holding a grudge for so long took its revenge in a most terrifying way. The mysterious killings shocked everyone. People were certain no human could have done it. Their necks had been twisted and crushed, yet not a drop of blood was on the bedding. Those who bathed the bodies saw that it was as if all the blood had been drained from them after the death of his parents. Fazl was left completely alone now. Even people were afraid of him. If he walked down a street, people would leave it. When he entered the mosque, those sitting there would flee without even offering their prayers, as if they had just seen a jinn. This entire situation deeply disturbed Fazl when he returned home. The memories of his parents would torment him, and the house itself seemed to close in on him each time their memory struck. Anger against that jinn grew inside him. He spent the days wandering aimlessly and returned home only at night. One night, as he neared the house, it seemed to him as if the tree was laughing at him. He stopped where he was and stared closely at it, and in that moment, the tree looked like a wolf with huge teeth in front. His hands were covered in blood, and the wolf was charging toward him. Fazl ran inside and grabbed a container from the room that was filled with kerosene oil. Without wasting a moment, he rushed toward the tree. He was hit with a strong push, but this time he managed to keep himself from falling. Then, in a loud voice, he began reciting verses from the Holy Quran, while at the same time sprinkling the kerosene oil on the tree. At that very moment, the tree began to echo with cries, wails, and sobs. But Fazl ignored every sound and kept going. After emptying the oil, he set the tree on fire. The lush green tree caught fire very slowly at first, but then the flames began to grow rapidly. As the fire intensified, the screaming and shrieking from the tree also became louder. The noise drew the attention of the villagers, who began coming out of their homes. At first, they couldn't understand what was happening, but once they realized it, they began shouting at Fazl, cursing him and trying to stop him from what he was doing. Fazl, however, felt a strange sense of relief as he listened to those screams. He didn't care what the villagers thought. Soon, the whole crowd began rushing toward the jungle, shouting in panic. By that time, the tree had burned completely into blackened coal. Fazl stood in front of it, tears rolling down his cheeks. After doing all this, he felt an intoxicating sense of triumph, as though a great weight had been lifted. With heavy steps, he went back home, entered his parents' room, and sat on his father's cot, crying bitterly. "Abba, Ami, today I have avenged you," he whispered. Lost in thoughts, speaking to his late parents in his mind, he eventually fell asleep right there. He had only been asleep for a short while when his cot began to shake. His eyes opened. It felt as if a strong earthquake had struck. He had just started running outside when a violent jolt came, shaking the entire house, and then with a loud crash, it collapsed on top of him. It felt as though he had been buried under a heavy weight. His breath began to choke, and he lost all consciousness. The entire village had gathered in the forest. They were all afraid, wondering what might happen next. They spent the whole night in the forest. As soon as Morning came when they returned to the village and looked toward Faisal's house. They were shocked in that place. A huge grave-like mound had formed. While none of the other houses were damaged, the villagers cautiously approached it. The collapsed house had taken the shape of a grave, and its surrounding walls had fallen inward, forming a platform around it on top of the grave. Some wild plant had bloomed with white flowers. The villagers stood there in astonishment beside the grave beneath it. Faisal now slept his final sleep, and that burned tree seemed to be smiling at them. The jinn had taken their revenge for cutting down and burning their dwelling, those very trees.